Welcome to the Team Engagement Podcast, where leaders of teams share their insights. We discuss 5 questions in about 10 minutes. And I am very excited to welcome our guest today. This is Rich Sheridan. He is the CEO and Chief Storyteller of Menlo Innovations out of Ann Arbor, Michigan. Rich, thank you so much for taking time to be with me on the podcast today. What would you like the audience to know about what you're working on at Menlo Innovations?
Sean, Menlo Innovations is a custom software design and development firm with a crazy big mission. We want to end human suffering in the world as it relates to technology, and our focus of attention away from that big negative that happens a lot in the software world is to bring joy to technology and the teams who build it.
Oh, that's great. I love that. Short and succinct, but I love the idea of getting out of the misery and getting into the joy. We need a lot more of that in all aspects of life, not just business or technology. So that's fantastic. Well, let's go ahead and get started with our questions today. Rich, as you've been building your business, is there a challenge that you're especially proud that you overcame?
Yeah, Sean, we're a services business, and as such, we, close a deal, build a piece of software, and move on. And in those kind of businesses, Sean, there's often gaps, and those gaps can be painful. And sometimes customers show up like this, where, you're already full up and new customer arrives, or sometimes projects show up like this and there's a big gap and you have to figure out how to fill it. And that's a neat entrepreneurial challenge. I just love those kind of things. And for me, what we ended up doing was paying our customers to behave better, to collaborate with one another. And the way we do that is simply for some of our clients, and we don't have too many that have to take advantage of this, we pay them a pretty big discount to give us flexibility as to when their project starts, how fast it goes, and sometimes even make it go faster when we have extra capacity. And what that does for us is keep a nice even load balance to our team that creates a much more comfortable business environment, profitability environment, and so on. And so in addition to the great things we do when we actually design and build software for our teams, having a nice running business day in and day out, year in and year out for the 21 years we've been in business has been just a wonderful place to get to as an entrepreneur.
Oh, yeah, that's fantastic, because that's kind of the goal of all entrepreneurs, is to have kind of this smooth running machine. There's always going to be those little things that come up from time to time. But I love the fact that you changed it to an environment and overcome different little challenges to turn it into something where it's smooth running, it's profitable, it's evenly balanced, the employees are all doing well and they're happy. I think that's great. So congratulations on that success. That's great.
Thank you.
Question number 2, how can leaders help foster creativity within a team?
Yeah, I think the job of a leader is to pump fear out of the room. There's a part of our brain that's responsible for creativity, for imagination, for invention, innovation. And it's interesting, that's the part of our brain that literally shuts down when we are afraid. And so even I had to learn in my early days in management that I had to stop trying to motivate people with fear. So create a positive work environment, build an environment of transparency and trust between the leaders and the frontline workers, create an environment where people feel comfortable approaching people like me, the CEO and owner of the company, to make sure that they understand what's going on, they understand why we're doing what we're doing, and give them a voice in the outcomes.
That's a great response. And I love how you talked in that phrase, pump fear out of the company or the environment. And I agree completely with your observation that the creative part of our brains will shut down if there's too much fear. And that's what we've got to figure out, how to get out of the office and out of the workplace. So I love that answer. Love that answer. The next question is kind of a follow-up to the last question, which is, how do leaders help team members trust each other?
Mm-hmm. Well, number one, don't create an environment where you set them at each other. In the early part of my career, pre-entrepreneurial, I worked in organizations that that would tout teamwork, collaboration, trust, and all this sort of thing. But there was that one magical day of the year where you'd go into the office with your boss, they'd close the door, and they'd have your annual performance review. And it was all about your individual goals. And the only way you succeeded was to make sure you did better than your peers.
Mhm.
Well, the trouble is that creates um, a destructive competitive force within your organization where each person starts to realize, oh, all those rah-rah speeches about teamwork? No, I don't have to run faster than the tiger, Sean. I just have to run faster than you. And I can throw you under the bus in the lunchroom by saying some snarky comment about the project that you're behind on. And then I look better. You're not going to build an environment of trust that way. And trust is based on relationships. Relationships are based on spending time together, getting to know one another. And we have to, in our organizations, foster a, a team that wants to work together, because there are very few projects anymore in the world where an individual lone hero can accomplish big things. We have to work together as teams, and we have to do it in a way that doesn't pit our team members against one another.
I could not agree more. There is so much need, not just to make things more productive in the workplace, but I think emotional well-being and really truly caring for each other in a relationship. And I love how you talked about getting to know each other and having that bond together and working in a team of, a spirit of harmony, not competitiveness. So great insights. Appreciate you sharing those. All right, question number 4. Is there a time or an experience maybe where it was kind of perceived originally as a failure, but you turned it into a win?
There was a big one, Sean. I had created a version of what I'm now doing at Menlo Innovations inside of a tired old public company, and it was wildly successful. And it literally, from my perch as VP of R&D at that public company, it transformed the whole company. And it was an amazing effect. And it was a proud moment for me. And for 2 years, we ran that experiment, and it was just wonderful. And then the internet bubble burst. And a California company that had purchased my old company had to shutter every remote office they had. And I was out of work for the first time in my career. I came home and I told my wife that I'd lost my job, and she looked at me with tears in her eyes and she said, "You're unemployed?" And I said, "No, honey, I'm an entrepreneur now." And what I had, even though I lost everything, job, title, authority, paycheck, stock options went to zero, they couldn't take away what I had learned in those 2 years. And what I had learned in those 2 years became the basis for the company I've now been leading for the last 21 years.
That is such an inspiring story. I love that because that happens. And it also goes back to what we were talking about a little bit earlier about kind of not letting the fear take over, because that inspired you. It was obviously a very difficult situation to endure, especially for your wonderful wife there, but you turned it into a win and you created a successful company that's been going for 21 years. Is that what I heard you say? So again, congratulations, not just on the success after 21 years, but of having the courage in that moment to say, no, I'm an entrepreneur and that's what we're going to do now. And you did it. I think that's fantastic. What an inspiring story. Thank you for sharing that. All right. Our last question. Tell us a little bit about your first job.
Well, I'm going to skip the dishwasher at Big Boy and the page at the Macomb County Library. My first big break actually came when I was in high school. I had typed in all of the Major League Baseball players into the computer. So my friends and I, this was way back in 1972, my friends and I could play our favorite Major League Baseball teams against one another in the cold Michigan winter months on the computer, right? You're looking at the guy who invented fantasy baseball. My life is probably littered with lost opportunities like this. And I entered that program at the encouragement of a wonderful teacher at my high school into an international programming contest, and I won the gaming category. And the place that was supplying us the compute power, that was a big feather in their cap, because they had created this new system of teaching high school students computer science back in the early 70s, which is kind of crazy to think that was happening back then. And the director of that program came down and he said, "Do you want to work for me?" I said, "Doing what?" And he says, "Programming." I said, "You can get paid for doing this?" And so I started after school. I'd go to that place, and I started working as a programmer in 1973 before I could even drive a car. And I stayed there through high school graduation. Eventually, went up to the University of Michigan, go blue, and got 2 degrees in computer science, computer engineering. But that job in 1973 launched a career that I am still in to this day, right? And what is that? I
Awesome.
mean, I'm now thinking about it like, holy cow, it's 2023. We're talking 50 years.
That's
How's that
impressive.
possible? I'm not that old.
I think you're probably one of the very first computer programmers that I've met, as far as clear back in early 70s. That,
Yeah,
gaming and those kinds of things, those really weren't things yet. I mean, obviously
no.
they were, but they were not widely known.
It
That's
I will
fantastic.
tell you, it felt magical back in those days. You thought you were a wizard that you could make a computer do something like that.
Oh yeah, I'll bet that was exciting. That's a neat
Was.
story. Awesome. Rich, thank you so much for taking time to be on the podcast today. How can people find you?
Yeah, I would say my best approach place is LinkedIn. Just look for me on LinkedIn. If you want to know the story, there's a whole book about how we built this joyful company. So there's a great way to do that too. But and your listeners should mention, hey, I was listening to you on the Sean Richards team engagement podcast, and I really appreciate what you said. Those kind of LinkedIn invites, I always say yes to.
Oh, great. Thank you. I appreciate that. And I also appreciate you promoting the book, because I think that's a great book. I haven't read it, but it's a great book. And anything that we can do to promote more joy and enjoyment in the workplace is well worth the time and investment. So again, Rich, thank you for being on the show. This is
Great.
Sean Richards with the Team Engagement Podcast, where leaders of teams share their insights. For more ideas, go to teamengagementpodcast.com. And we also encourage you to follow or subscribe the podcast, whether you're watching it or whether you're listening to it. Again, this is Sean Richards reminding you to have humility to learn and courage to act on what you've learned. Thanks so much for joining us. Have a great day.